I'm at Beth Chatto Gardens today in Colchester in Essex, and today we're going to carry out a simple garden survey. Now first of all you need two tapes, a long tape round about 30 metres and then a shorter tape to take some other measurements from. First of all you want to put your long tape out along the area in which you wish to survey. We've got a 30 metre tape here, and we've got the zero at this end and then it runs out to that end. Now this is called the baseline, and the baseline is the actual measurement line in which we're going to take the measurements from. Now I've got a smaller tape here and where we're going to take our second set of measurements here, and these are going to be for what's called the offset measurements. Now this is the end of the baseline here on zero, and the baseline, I'm just going to take you around, runs right the way down the full length of the border. Now the reason it's on the path is that this border winds round and it would be extremely difficult to get a reading from it. So if you've got a straight baseline like you have here, and then you take your offsets from the baseline, that you can then measure to the beginning of the bed, the front of the bed, and then you can measure to the back of the bed as well. And I'll show you how to take an offset from there. Okay, so I've started doing offsets from where it is at the start of the baseline, from zero up to the oak tree, and the front of the oak tree, the back of the oak tree, and this is a little bit further down the bed. So this is the baseline here. This is my second tape where I take the measurement from along the baseline, and then I want to measure particular things. So the particular thing I want to measure is where the bed starts and where the bed ends at the back of the bed. So at 7.5 metres along the baseline, this is one of the measurements, I'm going to measure from here and then record that this is the start of the bed just here, and that is, reading it in centimetres, it is 37 centimetres to the front of the bed, and I've gone to the back of the bed and it's 3 metres 20 to the back of the bed. Now just like I've come along the baseline and taken measurements up to here, I will continue to take these measurements along the baseline, and I will record these on a sheet of paper. Now the next stage of the process is to get that data that you've recorded from doing your survey onto a piece of paper. Now, what you will need is, you'll definitely need a scale ruler, because that border that you measured, that big border, is not going to fit on your piece of paper. So it's a very clever instrument, the scale ruler, and you can use different scales depending on the size of area that you're going to put onto a piece of paper. Normally for garden design it's usually about what's called a scale of 1 to 50, or 1 to 100 is very often the scale used for garden design. Now what that equates to is that for every 1 centimetre that you have on your paper, if it was 1 to 50, it would equate to 50 centimetres out actually in reality. Or if it was 1 to 100, that 1 centimetre on the paper here would equate to 100 centimetres or a metre out in the real world. So that means that you can get an exact replica of the border or the garden that you're going to design on your piece of paper to the exact scale. Now this is at the drawing stage now, and this is the survey completed, and how I went about doing this is this line that you can see here is the baseline that you saw in the border. It started at 0 And then the last measurement that we took at the end of the border was 18 metres and 80. So at 0.5 metres along the baseline, we measured to the front of the bed. I've highlighted, abbreviated that to FOB, and then I measured to a point at the front of the tree and the back of the tree. And then along the baseline again, we took another offset to the front of the bed, and then to the front of the tree, and then to the back of the tree. And then at 3.75 metres along the baseline, we measured to the front of the bed and then to the back of the bed. And how we actually drew this on here, if you see the scale ruler here, we used the scale of 1 to 50 along here. And then you can see along here that using the scale ruler, I've got it upside down here, but using the scale ruler, that's on 0, just like it was on the tape measure. And then there's 1 metre, so that's 50 centimetres. You can see that's 50 centimetres. That represents a metre on the 1 to 50 scale. 2 metres, that's 2 metres 35. 3 metres, that is 375. So we actually drew the baseline along here. You can see that it gets to 15 here. And then you do your extra little bit here, and that gets to 18 metres 80. Now, when you draw your offsets in at 0.5, for example, along the baseline, I'm using a set square to draw my offset measurements in, and that's because from the baseline measurements should be at right angles, and you can do your tape measures doing a 3, 4, 5 triangle to get your right angle triangle, or if you start at the back of the bed and then put your tape measure down, as you swing your tape measure, the longest measurement is where you're at a right angle. The shorter it gets, the more out with the right angle it gets. So if you use a set square to then put your measurements on, you exactly replicate what you've done in the border. And then to get your measurements in, you use your scale of 1 to 50. If this is your baseline to the front of the bed, for example, if it was 90 centimetres, you measure 90 centimetres on there and do your cross. And then you do your cross to the measurement where your front of your tree is and your back of your tree, and you end up with just a whole load of little stars on there. And then it's a bit like a dot to join it up. So these were all my front of the measurement calculations, and these were the back of the border calculations. So I've now got the front of the bed, the back of the bed, I've got the tree in there. Now I know there's plants in there already, but for a redesign from scratch, this is why we've got this bare border. If you did want to keep any of the plants in there, as well as the tree, you could have measured these out and then plotted these on there to keep. Now the next step is to actually start to just get the outline of your border that you wish to design. So here was the survey, and then I've just put another piece of tracing paper, which is the best paper to draw your survey on, over the top of the original survey, and then I've traced over the lines that I would like to keep, and then that eliminates all the measurements. So the baseline was along here, but we don't need the baseline. The baseline was only there to take the measurements from. What the measurements are the most important part, which is the front and back of the border. So I can take this out now and be left with the front and back of the border, and I'm just going to use these bits of sticky tape to stick it down. And I've stuck it down onto a plain sheet of white paper because that really shows off the actual paper itself. Now I've done this in pencil and not in pen because you're going to make quite a lot of mistakes. I'm sure you are. and then it's nice and easy to rub out rather than if it was in ink. I've drawn a border just round the outside of the paper, always looks good, just like when you frame a picture it always looks good. And then I've put an information box down on the right hand side here, and in that information box I've got the name of the project, the name of the designer, the client's name, the scale is really important, and then we've got the symbols for the key in here, and then just up here we're going to put where the north point is, just in this area up here. So the north is facing this way. For the north point, wherever you've got the arrow pointing, that means north. You don't have to write in north, everyone knows that it is in that, facing in that direction, or you could put an N if you wish.